Okay, everybody. I'm going to take this out. So, hey, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this final presentation in the Impact Room. My name is Hope Bohannick. I'm the organizer of today's event. Did you enjoy the Eugene Vegan Fest? Woo! I am so excited that Seth made the journey down to be with us. When I was first thinking about doing this and thinking about speakers, Seth was one of the very first ones, the first one that came to mind. I was like, oh, I'm in Seth Tibbott's territory. Let's see if we can get the legend down here, and he is here. So excited. Seth Tibbott founded Turtle Island Foods in 1980. Yes. That is now the Tofurky Company. For 15 years, Seth pursued his dream while losing his shirt as a pioneer of the early plant-based food movement. In 1995, Seth introduced the first nationally marketed vegan holiday roast named Tofurky. And how many of us has this saved us on a Thanksgiving or a Christmas? Oh, so grateful to have Tofurky. It soon became the most well-known meat alternative brand in the United States. Seth has chronicled his 40-year overnight success story in his new book. You don't have any more of the books? He's sold out. Oh, there it is. Hold that up for everybody. In Search of the Wild Tofurky. All right. He's also been a guest on my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast, so you can check him out there. And we're so grateful he came down. Please welcome Seth Tibbott.
Yeah, so good to be in Eugene. How did I ever live this long in the Northwest without having a period of my life in Eugene? I mean, it's so great to be back here. The last time I was here, I was doing a tempeh demo at Sundance in like 1985 or something. And so it's great to be here. Today I want to talk a little bit about some of the history of the vegetarian movement in Oregon. I was out giving a talk at the Portland Veg Fest. That's Portland, Maine, by the way. Yeah, Portland, Maine. Love Portland, Maine. When I first came to Oregon, I was like, boy, this feels like Maine, because I grew up on the East Coast. And sure enough, beautiful country, strong people. And so I did a little history because there was a woman out there that's a historian, and she did the history of vegetarianism in Maine. And we were thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to do one of all the states? And so this is I've been doing some research into Portland's history, and specifically Portland and Eugene's history, which I'm going to share with you now, and give a big shout out to some of the visionaries who have really fueled this movement for all these years. But I want to start with, Tofurky has been such an amazing product for me. And in 1980, when I sent in my letter to the Oregon Secretary of State to start a business, 2 weeks later, I went out to Minneapolis and visited my dear Aunt Rosie, who was a redheaded woman, and she was, I was terrified of her as a kid, because my mom was like, hey, you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Aunt Rosie wasn't like that. She was like, get in your head. And so I went into Aunt Rosie, and one night after a meal, I said, Aunt Rosie, I'm going to go into business, and I'm going to start making tempeh. It's fermented soybeans. And she just goes, stop. This is a terrible idea. This is a meat-eating country, and it's always going to be a meat-eating country. No one wants to eat soybeans, especially not moldy ones. So I was like, well, I was so excited, and I didn't want that to lessen my enthusiasm. So fast forward to 2001, and I'm sitting at my desk at the end of a Tofurky season, and the phone rings, and I'm ready to go home. It's 7 o'clock. And I go, well, I guess I'll answer it. And I answer, I pick up the phone, and I go, hello? And I hear this voice on the other end, and it's excited. And it's like, Seth. And I go, Aunt Rosie, is that you? And she goes, Seth, you were on Jeopardy. And I watch Jeopardy every night, and it's so cool. And so this is the 2001 $400 question, alternative Thanksgiving roast created by entrepreneur Seth Tibbott. That's cool, but everybody in this room could probably answer that question, but the 3 people on Jeopardy, nobody got it. And so then, recently in January this year, I'm watching Jeopardy. And what do I see come up as the $800 question? Alternative Thanksgiving roast created in 1905 by an Oregon hippie. And the one guy goes, I got that. What is Tofurky? And so they don't know me, but they know me as an Oregon hippie. To be fair, so that's progress. $400 to $800 question. Next up, daily double. Gotta be the daily double. But to be fair, in 1985, the Oregonian came up and interviewed me, and this is when I'm living in a tree for $300 and taking home $300 a month, and they're calling me a capitalist, a hippie capitalist. I'm going, really? So this is your capitalist. So no shirt, no shoes, no nukes. That was my motto. Anyways, and that was pretty cool to see that. It's always fun to be on Jeopardy, big show. But then the New York Times comes out a month later, and the mini, does anybody do the mini crossword there? Every day, yeah. And so 9 across was Tofurky. It was nice to share the mini with 11 across, LSD. Would there be Tofurky without LSD? We'll never know. But it's cool to see that kind of publicity for the brand. In the journey for Oregon, though, starts in 1863 with this woman, Ellen G. White, who, when she was 9 years old, she was living in Portland, Maine. She goes out on the schoolyard and she gets in a fight. And this guy picks up a rock and hits her in the face, knocks her out, and disfigures her face, but she starts having visions after that. And these visions lead to the founding of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so she was one of the founders. And then in 1863, right in the heart of the Civil War, she has another vision, and she hates this vision. She's a carnivore. She loves meat. And she gets this vision of God speaking to her, and it says, Adventists should be vegetarians, and they shouldn't eat meat. And so she's faithful to that vision, and she tells that vision. And this is the start of the Adventist Church. In 1876, she hires this young medical student, and she sponsors him through school, and his name is John Harvey Kellogg. His brother is the one that took the Kellogg business, but this guy was a vegetarian, and he got put in charge of the Battle Creek Sanitarium, which was this famous place where they'd have 1,300 people come and eat vegetarian meals all week, which was unheard of. And it was like the thing to do. Amelia Earhart went there, President Taft went there, Henry Ford went there. It was the place to go and get healing. But it was all vegetarian, but they also had exercise. Nobody exercised then. There was no gyms, there was no spas. It was just like, you go, this is the place you go. But he started doing tests with athletes, and he'd have vegetarian athletes going against carnivore athletes, and the vegetarian athletes could always hold their arms out longer and do more squats and everything. So this was like the beginning of kind of the game changers of the day, and it was the 1800s. He also invented stuff. He invented Protos, which was the first vegetarian meat alternative, and it was like peanut butter and gluten, like sounds good, and oregano, which was bizarre. But he could send these out all over the country because not everybody had refrigeration then. So he had canned Nuttos and Protos. He also founded he invented a cereal. And I'm going to give a beautiful chocolate bar, milk chocolate bar, vegan milk chocolate bar, to the person that can tell me what, this is the first breakfast cereal in America commercially marketed. What do we got? Not cornflakes. Wait, grape nuts? Who said grape nuts? Was it grape nuts? Grape nuts? It wasn't grape nuts. It was a product that tasted like grape nuts, a hearty grape nuts. And like granola was invented by John Harvey Kellogg's, but he got the idea from this guy in upstate New York who had a sanitarium, and his name was James Caleb Jackson. And ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the first breakfast cereal marketed in the United States. Granola. And they have a great marketing line. It's like the cereal you have to soak overnight. It's like, it tastes bad, but it's inconvenient too. Come on, get your granola. And granola. But before that, everybody was eating like ham and sausage and big, fatty breakfast. So cereal was a big thing to have back then. So I bring all this up because there was, there it is, a guy that worked with Kellogg called Louis Belcamp. And they were always saying, wouldn't it be great to have a sanitarium like this out in the West? And so he goes out. He first goes to San Francisco and he gets robbed. All his money is gone. And then he comes up to Portland and he finds this guy named Starbuck who lends him money, I'm kidding you not, to start a little sanitarium. And he has a small little sanitarium going in Portland. You know, it's kind of like when you're driving down I-5, you see the Enchanted Forest is to Disneyland, what this place would be to the real sanitarium. But Belcamp got it going, and he moved to a bigger place near Reed College. And, you know, he was an Adventist and got the thing going. But in 1894, there was a vegetarian society in Portland, Oregon. And this was a meeting that they had where they were talking about this fair in Chicago called the Columbian Exposition. It was this huge world fair. And they had this huge vegetarian exhibit there, and they had 28 million people came to the fair, and they experienced vegetarianism. And this jump-started vegetarian in the United States, was this fair. And suddenly Chicago had restaurants, and they had social clubs, and all this stuff here. But in Portland, there was this 1894 deal, and this is the woman that started it. This is Lucy Malroy, who was known as Portland's original eccentric. And Leo Tolstoy said that she was the most important woman in all of America. And she had like spiritual visions, but she also was this vegetarian. And so she had this book, the magazine called The World's Advanced Thought in Universal Public. So she was amazing. And you can see this is their mission statement, that they had really righteous mission of vegetarianizing the world, and specifically Portland. Portland also had what they called a conversation zone, and it was at 501 Yamhill Street, and they had free meetings every Tuesday, and they talked about the health aspects of vegetarianism. They talked about why are there no vegetarian gluttons, and drunkenness. Like, you never saw a vegetarian drunk, did you? No, because we're temperate. And then they also presented it as a cheaper way. You know, people criticize veganism sometimes. Oh, this is an elite thing. No, this was like they were talking about this to laboring people and the working class. So it wasn't that at all. This is an incredible story. This is my favorite story in the whole thing. Here's this vegetarian guy who he's got this vision and this idea of a vegetarian restaurant in Portland. So he goes, where am I going to get some feedback on this? Oh, I'll go to the Oregonian. They should know something about this. And so he goes to the Oregonian, and here's what they write. A pallid, wild-eyed young man with a starved look. There's a little, did he get the editorial department or what? Called at the Oregonian office last evening to inquire what would be the prospects of a profitable business for one starting a vegetarian restaurant here. He was told that as far as the employees of the Oregonian were concerned, his prospects would be mighty slim. It's like Aunt Rosie all over. His prospects might be forego meat if necessary. A large amount of fish food was absolutely necessary to keep the brain force required. That was the thought of the day. You needed for your brain, you needed to eat fish. He said brand and middlings were much better for the purpose and were used by the brainy men and women of today to make good the wear and tear of their gray matter. He went on to explain that there is already a fine vegetable milk made and sold in this country. This is 1902. And that butter is made from the butter tree. I don't know where that comes from. And that cheese can be made from peas and beans. Amazing, huh? He's talking about vegan cheese this guy's like 100 years ahead of his time. And he said that perch and vegetable turkey are served in vegetarian restaurants, and by request, he gave them the following recipe: 2 cups breadcrumbs, 2 cups chopped peanuts, 2 eggs, turkey eggs preferable, 2 spoonfuls of diamond butter, oil, sage, salt, and pepper to taste, water to make that. He was talking Tofurky in 1902, and the young man was told that he would no doubt make a very excellent vegetable turkey, and he would call and give them a vegetable turkey. He's offering to give them a vegetable turkey, and they're like, yeah, you can, if you're busy at Thanksgiving, Christmas will work, and any Christmas within a dozen years will do. Snarky, like what's with these people? They always cut down vegetarian. So this is classic Oregonian of that day. And in that day, by the way, there were 4 vegetarian restaurants in Portland at that time, and 2 of them were Adventists, and I tracked down the addresses of all of these. The one at 60th and Powell was where the Adventist hospital was, that you can still is available in Portland. But Portland was always kind of ahead of its time. This book, The Jungle, came out in 1906. Has anybody read that book? It's amazing. And, you know, he started out writing the book about how immigrants in this country were mistreated by the meat packing houses. But he always said, I aimed for the heart, but I hit the stomach. And what it did was people were so grossed out. Like that, you know, you read in this book and they have galleries where people could come and watch the slaughterhouse. You know, people say if there were glass walls in the slaughterhouse, nobody would eat meat. But this was a time when, you know, you could go into any slaughterhouse and just watch it. And it just grossed people out, and it became the most effective vegetarian book. It really helped the vegetarian movement get going. It was like the Uncle Tom's Cabin did for slavery, what The Jungle did for vegetarianism. And it's amazing to me because now there's all these, you know, graphic videos, Dominion and everything, and, you know, people can watch it, but and this was a novel, and this novel had, like, this is why meat plants today have USDA inspectors in them, because they found people shoveling sawdust off the floor and putting it in sausage and all of these sick animals that were getting people sick that they shouldn't have harvested. But down in Eugene, you saw even back then a more respectful treatment of vegetarian diets. You know, last night I went to the Acorn Cafe. People been to that? What a great place. And it's on Monroe Street, which in 1917 had its own vegetarian cafe right here in Eugene. So Eugene had a history, and the Eugene Register Guard had a much softer tone on vegetarianism. Here they're talking about, faux fur. You think we invented faux fur? No, it was Emerald Freschel, a vegetarian activist in Boston. She started the first anti-vivisection society in the U.S., and she would always have these big gala Thanksgiving veggie dinners in Boston, and she'd always wear faux fur just to prove a point. And then there was actually vegan shoes at that time too, and advertised in different magazines of the day. So, and I think there was the Morning Register, and there was also the Morning Guard. Now you have the Register Guard, but and this is the first time in history someone asked, "Where do you get your protein?" in the state of Oregon, and it's all about a woman who's talking to a friend who is still an eater of flesh, and she's saying, if I had to go back to the old custom of cooking and serving meat to her 3 times a day, I couldn't do it. And she goes, but what do you substitute for it? What takes the place of meat on your table? We've all heard that one. So it's amazing how old that, misconception is in the state of Oregon. But they were also talking at the bottom about how vegetarianism was growing in numbers in the nation's capital and blah, blah, blah. So cool to see there. This is another woman activist, Carrie LaFarve, who eats on $1.30 a week out there. We're always told, once again, vegetarian diets are either too expensive or they're too cheap. You just can't win for losing. There was this article about the vegetarian restaurants in Portland. There was this vegetarian restaurant that was crammed with people. And the Oregonian went in there and they said, yeah, you're only crammed with people because you're selling soup for 2 cents. So it was too cheap. He said, the better people won't eat there. It's just for the things there. So can't win for losing, though, to be fair, 2 cents is a good price for soup. Anyway, so they would really, they had the Eugene papers had a much better view of vegetarianism. And here they're talking about a cross-country walk, and they had 2 brothers, one who ate meat and one that didn't, and the one that ate meat could not keep up with the vegetarian one. And so there's lots of people that were just trying to disprove this pallid, weak vegetarian and doing amazing things. And thank you, Eugene, for reporting about it. This is a story, Oda Tofu. People know Oda Tofu. Oda Tofu is the oldest tofu shop in the U.S., and it was founded in 1911 by Saizo and Shina Tofu of Japan. And in 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, FDR ordered all the Japanese Americans to be put in internment camps. And so they had this profitable tofu business in Old Town Portland, and they had to leave it. And it was just sitting fallow, And in that time, there was something like $3 billion worth of Japanese property that was seized, or businesses that failed. And they were interned in a internment camp in Idaho. And Seizo, the husband, he couldn't take it and he died. And when the landlord of Oda Tofu in Portland heard about this, she said, I'm going to just keep this ready for them so when you come back. I'm not going to rent this to anybody else. So 3 years later, Sheena came out there, his wife, and started the business back again. And this is their offspring. This is Ko Oda and Eileen Oda. And Eileen Oda, I had a lot to do with both of them. When I'd run out of beans when I was making my tempeh, I'd go and get a bag of beans from them, and they always would give me like these free tofu samples, because she knew I didn't have a lot of money. And She was just a saint. So they're an amazing company, and what a great story in vegetarian Portland to have Oda Tofu, which still is such a great place. Then the 1920 to 1960s hit, and it's kind of a sleepy time for vegetarianism, although not this guy that's enjoying choplets, which is a canned food that was made during that time. And here are two of the big things that happened during that time. This is, of course, Donald Watson, the founder of veganism. And I didn't even realize this, but where he got the name vegan was the first 3 letters of vegetarian and the last 2 of vegetarian. And he said, this will be the beginning and the end of vegetarianism. So I like what he did there. But the other thing that was kind of important in the 1940s was Worthington Foods was founded. That is Morning Star. You're probably seeing Morning Star. That was like a trailblazing brand in the supermarkets for a long time. And they had their first plant was a house in Ohio, Worthington, Ohio. And they tore out the inside and made it a production plant because they thought if this fails, it will be easier to sell the house than it would be a factory. So they had that, but it was the Adventists who really were carrying the mail and pushing vegetarian forward throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Look at this, another soybean roast. See? The more you study history, the less innovative you become. I thought, oh, I'm the cat's pajamas. I'm innovative here. Tofurky roast. Who ever thought of a Thanksgiving roast? Well, here was one, and this was in the Eugene Guard in 1952. And then the Oregonian, true to form, he's like, I don't like vegetarians, prohibitionists, and diet bugs, especially vegetarians. Like, old Robert Rueck, dustbin of history. But that was the Oregonian. There was a presidential party. There was a vegetarian presidential party in the 40s and 50s. They had everywhere from 1948 until 1960, they had a candidate. This was the 1948 ticket. And it was, although man has included meat in his diet for thousands of years, his anatomy and physiology and chemistry of his digestive juices are still unmistakably those of a frugivorous animal. The story was he did concede to Eisenhower, who had 35 million votes, and he had 2,000. So he thought, I don't know if I'm going to win this thing, although today he might challenge it if he was a part of certain parties, not to get political here. But that was pretty cool. And then we come to our time. We remember, who's read Diet for a Small Planet? Yeah. And that was such a groundbreaking book for me, and it was what I originally read and became vegetarian based on it. And it was amazing. One of my really mentors was the farm. Anybody been to the farm in Tennessee? This was a farm started by Stephen Gaskin, who was an English professor until he took LSD, 11 across, and he was talking to he got this in Haight-Ashbury. He was interpreting what people were feeling in Haight-Ashbury at the time into religious terms, and he got a chance to drive across country and give all these talks, and all of his followers were, we want to go too. And so he said, get a bus and we'll go. And so they got a bus tour of about 20 buses, school buses, old school buses, painted up, everything. And they'd go into a state, and the police would stop them at the borderline, and they'd go, you guys got any drugs? And they'd go, yeah, we got lots of drugs, but you'll never find them because we hit them really well. And the police were like, how do I deal with this? Just get going and don't stop, because their big sacraments were truth, and it was drugs. Like certainly, marijuana was like their sacrament, but when they got to Tennessee, they became a community, and they had 1,600 acres of soybeans growing, and they had 1,200 hippies when I was there. And they were making tempeh, tofu, ice bean. They were way ahead of their time. They were really positioned to be like the Gardein of today or something, But did I mention the marijuana? Because it sort of didn't really work in business for them. But they were great pioneers, and they, a lot of the companies, White Wave, Wildwood, Tofurky, they were all influenced by farm people and them going out and spreading the word and going into business. Light Life, that's another one that came from the farm. Here I'm giving a shout out to an Oregon pioneer. Did anybody remember Sunbow? When I was just looking into how to start this soy dairy with tempeh, this was my dream. This is in their house. This is Harry McCormick and his partner Mia. They had a wood-fired tofu factory in Corvallis, and they were the real deal. They were working their ass off and making like everything the hard way, but it was so good, what they were doing. And they also made sausage and an American burger, falafel. They were pioneers, but it's hard to make money as a small business and to make a good wage for yourself or your employees. And I think they still might have an organic farm up there, but the tofu is no more. But this is one of the real trailblazers that I admire, and I visited them several times, and they were. This is 1980 when I found them, but they had been going since 1972, and that was pretty cool. Your own Serrata Soy Foods, I am so impressed that, those guys, they're older than Tofurky is, and they're just doing such wonderful work and still making great tempeh, great tofu, and they've kept it simple, but they've kept it great quality, and I think that's a trailblazer that's been inspiring to me and that we should recognize. Then there's Garden Burger, which was the first burger to make it really into the mainstream, I would say. And it wasn't a vegan burger, and he always said, no soy in this burger, and that was one of his big sell points. I knew Paul, and that's the house he built in Southeast Portland, this Art Deco house. But Garden Burger, I'm really sort of sad that I forgot the lesson of Garden Burger, because Garden Burger went public in 1992, and then they grew. By 1997, they were the fastest growing stock on Wall Street. Remind you of some other burger that just came out, like the Beyond Burger. It was almost the same exact trajectory as a Beyond Burger, and then the stock was apparently overvalued. I don't know how those stocks work, but it cratered, and he kind of lost the business, and they ended up selling to Kellogg's for pennies on the dollar. But I do have a fun fact and another candy bar to give away, and that is, what was the commercial, the famous commercial that Garden Burger did in 1997 when they hired the quote-unquote smartest guys in the room to run Garden Burger? Like Paul had overseen this growth, and then he's like, I need these smart business people, and the business people were like, they ran up like $47 million in like marketing. But one of these things was on a very mainstream media TV presentation. Anyways, it was a famous Oregon pioneer, was Paul Wenner, and Gardenburger, which was oats and cheese and mushrooms, a lot of mushrooms, yeah. Jolly Licks, do you know, and Turtle Mountain So Delicious, who was out here in Junction City, and this guy, Mark Browerman, who I had some dealings with, you know, when my first 3 products of tempeh was soy tempeh, 5-grain tempeh, and temperoni, which was this sausage-shaped tempeh, and it was flavored with herbs and everything. And the next thing I know, I look up, and down in San Francisco, this guy Browerman has this Living Lightly brand, and he has a temperoni pizza. And he's not using temperoni from the source. And so I had to go out and get like one of those free lawyers, write him a letter. He was nice about it, and we worked it out. But he started Jolly Licks, which then became Soy Delicious, and then dropped the Y to become So Delicious. And
That is the best chocolate ice cream.
yeah, it's a great product. And it was the first all vegan soy ice cream factory in America, because most of the other people were having, like others that were making cow ice cream, make the ice cream, and this was the first one. And then there's this guy. This is the first tempeh incubator that I had. I found it under the Hawthorne Bridge, and I paid 4 burly guys 2 pitchers of beer to help me load it into a truck. And I cleaned it up and made 100 pounds of tofu a night in Hope Co-op Cafe, which was in Forest Grove. And for $25 a month, I could rent their cafe, which was only open till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'd come in and make tempeh until the wee hours of the morning, and then I would come back the next day and harvest it. It was a great deal, and I learned a lot from the managers of the co-op, who I had dinner with, Doug Curry, one of them, last night. But they taught me a lot about business, because I didn't know nothing about business, and that was for sure. And I saw Robert, who was my real mentor, and he knew all things about business, and he said, I would have never loaned you any money at that time because you were pretty stupid. And I'm like, yeah, I was stupid, but I'm less stupid now, a little bit. But that's and this was my label, and you be the judge, soy tempeh. So yeah, I made tempeh there, and then I got a call from Applegate Distributors, and they said, we want 1,000 pounds a week. And I'm like, I can make 100 pounds a night. How am I going to do that? So I started looking for places all over Portland and everything, and I didn't have any, I was grossing $1,300 a month at that point. And so I needed a cheap place, but a clean place. And I was looking at places. I looked at this basement that was under a speedometer shop. And every time they would calibrate the speedometers, they'd have to run the wheels at like 60 miles an hour. And spider parts would drop down from the ceiling. And I was like, that's probably not going to work. But I ended up finding this old school building in Hewsum, Washington, which is about an hour from Portland. And it had no heat. You know, when I was looking for cars when I didn't have money, my delivery vehicle was a $350 Datsun that had one side bashed in, and the driver's side door was sitting in the back seat. So it was advertised as, but it was some body damage, but the engine was good. And I drove that for a while, and the building was the equivalent of some body damage because there was no heat, and the water was all froze up and everything. We didn't have hair nets, apparently, or beard nets at that point, especially that. That's Alex, who came from the farm, and he was a microbiologist that was actually the guy that went to NIH and found all these studies about tempeh. So he's kind of the George Washington of tempeh. he came to work for me. This was my tree house, 300 square foot tree house. I had flying squirrels visited me regularly in the night, checking on me in their neighborhood. You know, it was a pretty sweet place to live. There was a basketball court in the school too, so it was like, and I rented the school for $150 a month, and $25 a month for 4 trees for the tree house. So for $175 a month, I had a gymnasium, workout room, a house on a golf course. It was a Frisbee golf course that we put up, but still. And it worked out for me. A very generous time in Klickitat County, very poor county. But then 1995, this is the first Tofurky. That was all tofu, and it was tempeh drumettes. There was 4 tempeh drumettes in the package, so we didn't know what Tofurkys looked like in the wild, but we knew they had 4 legs. And it was just crazy media. You know, they couldn't get enough of Tofurky, and we got into a lot of newspapers and stuff, and then people started jumping out of planes with Tofurky boxes and sending them to them. And then we built this LEED Platinum Tofurky plant, which is still the plant that Tofurky comes from in Hood River, Oregon. And that's the sort of short version of my story. This is a guy, have you had this bacon? Anybody had this bacon? Isn't this incredible? Like, I think this is David Jones, and he was formerly, they started in Portland, they're now in Las Vegas, but he's my, you know, there's so many people I could mention that are, you know, doing such incredible things now in the vegan space. And he's sort of my representation of an entrepreneur. They're still trying to scale that because the process is so hard. They smoke it twice, and they're using tofu. They're doing it the right way, and I really hope they get it. But it's pretty spendy now. I think it's like $15 for that pack, but people pay anything for bacon, huh? So he's a great founder. So here's a little peek at the vegan future that I see, or some of the products and things that are happening in our world. One thing I want to point out is here's the problem that we're faced with is how do we feel, you know, there's 7 billion of us now, going to be 10 billions. So how do we feed them without using more land? And while lowering emissions, not increasing emissions. And so we're going to need 56% more food, and we currently use 50% of the vegetative land for agriculture. So we need to save an area of forest the size of 2 Indias and lower emissions by 67%. Sounds impossible until you look at the horrid way that we use land and you know, prepare food right now. And my next slide is a look at the vegetarian or the vegan restaurants. I've been tracking World Cities vegan restaurants for like 5 years now, and you're going to be very surprised. I don't have a candy bar. I don't have anything to give. Do I have anything? Okay, yeah, I got something. I got a tempeh cookbook to give to the person that can tell me the city or even the country in the world that has the most vegan restaurants. This is incredible. Look at this thing. 334 vegan restaurants in Ho Chi Minh City, which is a good story. But look at the others, you know. New York City is down. This is in 6 months' time. New York City has lost 8, London's lost 18, Taipei they're basically flat. They've lost 1. Mexico City, 20 down. Los Angeles, 17 down. Berlin, 4. Tokyo, 10 down. Bangkok, 6 up. And Paris, down 1. You know, it's interesting to me how Ho Chi Minh, Taipei, and, Tokyo, but Bangkok, these Asian cities don't seem to be slumping like we are. You know, there's so much misinformation being presented now by the meat industry. They've got, 54% of the people thinking like that vegetarian foods are processed and bad and everything. So the Western countries seem to be suffering the most. But Ho Chi Minh City, I mean, this is Happy Cow information too, and the way Happy Cow works is it depends on people writing it in, so that 334 number is inflated because they have an ambassador over there who's just going around and doing all countries. So if they had ambassadors doing the same thing, maybe there'd be more in other countries. But it's gives you an idea, anyways, of the market. Tough time to be in the restaurant business, period, and vegan restaurant especially. But the trend line is up. Thank you, Ho Chi Minh. Plant-based whole food diets, certainly on the rise, and more people going that way, and I'm all for it. It's great to see these very healthy, sustainable diets around the world. But at the same time, there it is. I want to tell you about the living history meal that I'm organizing in Philadelphia. This is a recipe that was first published in Good Housekeeping magazine in 1900, and it was kind of cool. And you'll notice that it included a vegetable turkey. I have now found 9 vegetable turkey recipes from the 1890s and 1900s. Vegetarians were busy back then. They were trying to get this, and they all have eggs, like tons of eggs. Like this white fruit cake down there is more like a white coconut cake. There are 16 eggs in that thing. So we're going to veganize that, 16 eggs. So we're veganizing this whole recipe, and we've got a chestnut eggplant roast, because they had nuts and they had veggies, and that's what they were making these vegetables. So this is like a living history meal, and we've got 9 vegan restaurants in Philadelphia, each making one of these items. And they're all going to be put together, and we've got a barbershop quartet, and we've got Scott Joplin piano music. We got a EV horseless carriage that's going to give carriage rides, without horses, and vegan walking tours. And, if you want more information, I've got some flyers here, but we can keep in touch, or just give me your email and I'll do it. But if you're in Philadelphia, or have a reason to go to Philadelphia, which is an underrated vegan city, Philadelphia. Well, that's where the American Vegan Society is, where I'm raising the money, and I've worked with them and given several talks there, and I like Philly. Hate the Eagles, but like Philly. So anyways, that's a whole food vegan meal. Then here's the other side, steaks. There's a lot of steaks. This is the Juicy Marbles steaks. I don't know if anybody's had that. It's really good. This is a 3D printed vegan steak that has fat, blood, and muscle, and it's in these jets, and it's a company from Israel called Redefined Meat, and they're making this steak like right there. There's also chunks, and there's also Off Beast, and I think one other that are doing steaks now. So steak is like a big thing. And this is vegan salmon. This is 3D printed vegan salmon that I had at a trade show down in Anaheim, and that I couldn't believe how they could do it, but I guess with 3D printing you can do layers, and it was real flaky, too fishy. The steak had really good texture and really good taste too. The salmon, they didn't have that taste of salmon, I thought, yet, but these are, I think he's improved it, and this is in restaurants and a few stores in New York City now. But 3D printed materials, foods are coming. But then here's the elephant in the room, you know. You hear so much about processed food. What about processed food? It's so terrible for you. This is all coming from the people that brought you hot dogs. I mean, come on. It's like we're supposed to wear the letter P on our chest because of this. And 54% of America now thinks that processed vegetarian foods are bad or worse than processed animal foods. Thank you, big meat. But, you know, there are studies that are being done. For instance, this one is from Oxford, and it looks at the ultra-processed foods category. Ultra-processed foods is defined as formulations of ingredients, mostly of exclusive industrial use, typically created by a series of industrial techniques and processes. For instance, it includes colas, donuts and pastry, hot dogs, meat, bacon, meat. It includes Tofurky. It includes Oatly. It includes tofu, and it includes hummus. So there's like your processed foods. So this study, which was published by Lancet Journal, which is the big medical journal, in December of 2023, researchers looked at the dietary habits of 266,000 participants across 7 different countries for 11 years. They found that there was an increased risk of multimorbidity, cancer, and cardiometabolic disease linked to processed animal products and sweetened beverages. Here's the kicker. The same association was not found for plant-based meats, breads, or cereals, which is amazing. And so by looking separately at different groups of food that are usually lumped together as ultra-processed, the new study was unique in being able to identify that different types of processed foods and different effects on long-term health. And to conclude, the health impact of processed foods depends on the specific food, not the degree of processing. Not that science is a good motivator for many people. You know, people buy stories and they buy anecdotes and a lot of reasons. But this is an amazing study, and if you want to read more about the study, you can find it online or on the Veganuary website. So, yeah, now we're into really interesting food, you know, micro-fermented foods. And here's 2 that we're looking at. One is called Find. Has anybody seen that? It's sold in New York City, but it's also sold in Whole Foods and I think maybe Sprouts. But these foods are all from a microbe, and the microbe that these guys found was discovered in a hot spring in Yellowstone when NASA was looking at different planets, like are there microbes that we could convert into food in extreme places on Earth, and that's when they found this fungi, and they make yogurt that is more like a Greek kind of yogurt, and they make breakfast patties, and they're starting to make other stuff from this microbe process. And then Air Protein is a San Francisco company. Look at that, it's 85% protein. That's like a big number. Like tempeh is like 21% protein, and it's one of the highest proteins in the plant kingdom. Low fat, zero carbon footprint, cradle to grave. So if we're looking at how do we feed people without more land, you know, this is like a possible solution. And there's the Air Protein. They hope to be on the market within 2 years. And then there's this company called Solar Foods over in Finland, and they found a microbe in the forest, and once again, this was from a NASA study that was looking at, like, if we send these astronauts deep into space, how are we going to feed them? And they did this in the 70s, but since we weren't sending astronauts deep into space, these studies kind of gathered dust on the shelf. But now that our home planet is looking like a spaceship deep into space with limited resources and needs, these are being dusted off. So, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the melting iceberg, to be fair, but these guys have made something. This is the footprint of meat, and it's 600 less water than beef, 100 times less water than plants. So as much as plant-based foods are more efficient than animal-based foods, they're saying solein is even more efficient than plant-based. And they're pointing out that this is like the freedom from agriculture, because even like any of your grains, quinoa, soy, it's like you get maybe 1 or 2 crops a year, but here you can make protein every like 48 hours, and you can make it anywhere in the world that you can have solar energy or a production plant. And it's 200 less land than beef, 20x land less than plants. So if you're talking about how do we do it, you got to look at this. Like, whether it will be popular or not is a great question, but like we say at Tofurky, taste is king, cost is queen, everything else is marketing. If they can hit taste, texture, and marketing, we might be seeing some of these in the future. They've received a lot of funding, and they're making benchtop product. They're not in production, but Find is in production now. So we're seeing this starting to crawl to the market, and I think they did a good job. Okay, so this is my, to wrap up, I wanted to salute. The reason that we're here really is based on a lot of people's visions, and I just want to shout out to them. There's Ellen White, and there's old John Harvey Kellogg, this big old mustache, and his wife Ella, who really was in the kitchen. I have a feeling it was probably her that invented granola, even that John Harvey got the credit. And there's old John, the granola man, who got ripped off, and Emerald Freschel, Lucy Mallory, the most eccentric woman in America, Tolstoy, and Carrie LaFarve, hats off to her, and Watson, Stephen Gaskin, there's old Harry McCormick, and Mia, and then, we got Serrata, we got Saizo Oda, and we have Paul Wenner. We got the Tofurky early employees, especially Graciela, and we have Eileen Oda and David Jones and all those guys, and especially that strong, wild-eyed vegetarian that walked into the Oregon office in 1902 and offered to give him a Tofurky roast of his own thing, or a vegetable turkey. So all these guys played a part in our thing, and during this time, which is a hard time, I'll leave you with this. Resist the temptation to drown in fatalism, to shake your head and sigh and just throw in the karmic towel. Realize that this is the perfect moment to change the energy of the world, to step right up and crank your personal volume right when it all seems dark and bitter and offensive and acrimonious and conflicted and bilious. There's your opening. Remember magic and finally believe you are part of a groundswell, a resistance, a seemingly small but actually very, very large impending karmic overhaul, a great shift, the beginning of something important and potent and unstoppable. From the Sun magazine. And thank you. That's it.